Hello and welcome to your Yin and MFR class for knee resilience and knee pain. This class is great if you've ever had any kind of knee issues or pain anywhere in that knee vicinity. When it's really important when we look at pain to look downstream and upstream. So throughout our practice today, that is exactly what we're going to be doing, looking at all the key major muscles of the lower extremities. So all you're going to need for class today is a set of blocks or a blanket can be really helpful, and a set of myofascial release balls. So whenever you have your equipment, meet me on the mat and let's jump right in. Okay, so for our first area, we're going to be looking at the front of the shin. So focusing more on the anterior body or the front body. So we're going to come loosely into Janu Shardrasana. But if sitting like this doesn't make you feel comfortable, however you want to sit, where you'll just kind of access to the side of the shin, but not the back of the calf, but kind of like right here on the side. So for this one, we're just going to place the ball physically on the leg and then use our hand and body weight to play a little bit around with pressure. So if this general sitting feels good, or you can always tuck this other leg behind, or whatever makes the most sense. But if you join me and you kind of palpate and you feel your frontal shin bone, we're going to be just off of that and then towards the inside of the lower leg. So somewhere in between the two. So like I've got the seam on my pants here acting as one edge, the shin on the front side of my bone structure, and then I'm just going to be in between the two. So we're not on the side of the leg, we're not on the front of the shin, but we're right in between the two. And start just beneath the knee and just place your hand and then just press a little firmly into that spot. Now we're going to pick up the ball and move it down just a little bit below, maybe a half an inch below, and again just gently press. So as you work your way down the leg, maybe just halfway down the lower part of the leg, we're just going to be gently pushing that ball so it kind of feels like it's almost going in behind the bone. So we're really targeting this whole area underneath the knee that might be physically pulling on the knee, causing a little pain, but trying to release this as well. Once you've made about halfway down, just start back over beneath the knee, gently press. Now as you start to go here for your myofascial release, I invite you to really pay attention to anything that might feel a little tender, maybe a trigger spot, might be just a bit of an adhesion, anything that sparks some noticing. So if you find a spot that really starts to speak a little louder than the rest of the spots, just kind of note that in your mind. We're going to come back to that spot and hold compression. But for now, we're really trying to just work our way and release the entire lower limb here. This is also a really nice therapeutic modality if you ever have shin splits, if you're a runner, or any kind of shin issues, or even really tight calves. Sometimes it's nice to work directly on what's tight, but sometimes it's really helpful to work around that and get all of the surrounding tissue. So after you've made a couple passes, come back to the spot that felt a little bit more tender, and then we're just going to stay here and breathe for a little bit, just holding a gentle amount of compression. Nothing painful. Often with myofascial release, less is more. So just finding that spot that allows you to take the deep breaths, that allows you to kind of melt in and just notice. Just taking those deep breaths, allowing your body to soften in. And after a few rounds of breath, we're just going to flip it over on the other side. So now we're going to be placing the ball on the outside of the shin. So again, if you kind of palpate for the bone and then kind of let your fingers fall off a little bit so you feel some more meaty structures, that's where we're going to be going. This time we're actually going to use the weight of the leg to help us though. So again, placing the ball underneath the knee and then just leaning into it. Again, if the extended leg gets tired, feel free to tuck it in or take any other variation. Something that just allows you to rest your leg here. Now again, you can physically move the ball down and find different spots, something to feed into. Or what I like to do is use my opposite arm to kind of pick up the foot and then just gently pull the foot forward and back. So a little bit of cross fibering against the fascia there can be really helpful. Or if you'd like to cover more area, just gliding along the outside of the shin with that foot lifted. If you lose the ball, just reset. If you're doing the cross fibering after a few rounds of that forward and back motion, just move the ball down a little bit down the leg so we can find a different spot. And if you're rolling, just if that feels good, continue with the up and down rolling motion, covering more tissue at once. Again, what we're looking for here is something that allows us to notice. We're looking for the spots that might be causing us a little bit more issue there or hindrance. And also something you can just breathe softly into. So nothing that causes straining or clenching of the jaw. After a couple of passes, see if you can't find that one spot that spoke a little louder. And then if you're holding the foot, I invite you to set the foot back down. And then what I like to do here is just lean a little forward, or if you need a little bit more sensation, take this free leg, kind of stack it on top, and then lean in. So just inviting in more body weight, which will obviously invite in more pressure through the compression, but whatever feels really good for you. And again, we'll just stay here for a few deep breaths, allowing the tissue to soften around the ball. Just allowing yourself to melt in. And we're going to stay on the same leg for this first little portion, so we can take a moment in between and compare the two sides. So when you feel ready, let's go ahead and release off of that. Now for this next bit, you're going to need 2 balls. If you don't have 2 balls, a foam roller can work really nice. And if you don't have any of that, a really tightly rolled up blanket can work really helpful with the calves and the hamstrings. So make use of what you've got. But I'm going to be using balls in a block for today. So having your block on its lowest setting, you're going to place the balls side by side and set them kind of right in the middle. We're going to be placing not the thickest part of the calf, so don't think the head of the gastrocnemius, but right underneath of that. So I'm not going to be on the ankle, but we're still not in the thickest portion of the calf, but right in between the two. So go ahead and place right there on the balls. Now you have a couple options here. You can just let the body weight settle and point and flex the foot, or circle the ankle if that feels helpful. I really like for this one to physically pick up my hips just a little bit and then just roll, just set down an inch, up an inch, right there in that vicinity. So I'm not coming into the middle of the calf. I'm staying still below that, but just gently massaging. So find what works for you. If today you're not feeling like picking up the body weight, then feel free just to lean back into it. And if you need a little bit more without picking up the hips, you can always stack your free leg on top, again, just kind of pinning the tissue down and then moving the foot to help stimulate there in the calf. So just, again, notice how that feels. Gather in that information. Take a few deep breaths. If you like the rocking and rolling, stay with that. That can also be really nice on a foam roller. If you're on the rolled up blanket, probably the compression with the foot movement would serve you best. But if you're moving the foot around, make sure you play around with different orientations. So internally rotate, externally rotate, finding every little bit of information that you can find. And then whenever you feel done, let's just move up a little bit. So now we're going to place right the middle of the calf there. So think the biggest head of the calf, that gastrocnemius, the thickest part of your calf. Again, right there on the balls, and the same thing. You can point and flex. You can circle the ankle. If it feels really nice, pick up the hips and roll right there through the head of the calf. But find something that feels really helpful for you. And just stay really focused on your nice deep breathing. Again, if you'd prefer to keep the hips down and you're not getting a whole lot of sensation, it does help to add that extra leg in and then come back to the pointing and flexing or circling of the foot. And whenever you feel ready, we're going to come up to our last spot. So I'm not actually going to be in the soft tissue behind the knee where it's just kind of more spindly and there's a bunch of nerves, but right above the head of the calf. So you're just in this kind of upper portion of the lower leg. So just anywhere above where you just were. Again, all ways of doing it apply. You can roll, you can pin the tissue down and move the foot. You can just have the weight of that one leg, whatever feels really helpful for you. Now, as we were noticing, hopefully you found a spot that felt a little bit louder, was talking a little bit louder, something that gave you a little bit more feedback than the rest. And I'm going to invite you to come back to that spot and then just hold compression for a few deep breaths. It's inviting the calf to soften through the feet, soften through the ankles, maybe even the face and the jaw, letting go of tension and really just melting in here. Now we're gently going to work our way up. So again, we're going to skip actually behind the knee and we're going to come right to the bottom portion of the hamstring. So think right above the knee is where we're heading next. Might be helpful to turn your block so it's not pushing into the calf, and then set the balls down. And so the more you lean back, it'll be a little less pressure. The more forward you lean, a little bit more. But again, find what works for you. If it feels really nice to kind of roll, then feel free to pick the hips up and just gently roll. And again, this one can also be really nice on a foam roller. Make sure you're turning the foot out and in. So we're getting the entire hamstring where it connects with the inner thigh, the outer thigh, where it runs straight down the back of the thigh. Just trying to really cover as much as we can. And you're just gathering in that information, seeing how that feels. And then we're just going to move it up a little bit. So we're not going to be coming all the way up to the connection with the hamstring and the hip. We're really just going to be focusing more on the meaty portion of the hamstring towards the middle and lower. Again, just finding what works for you. You want to stay put, or if you kind of want to roll a little bit. And then maybe there's area to find just one more spot. Maybe now we're about mid or just above the mid portion of the hamstring. For this one, I like to just lean my weight forward and allow the upper body weight to weigh in a little bit. So again, find what works for you. And then gently release. So before we get into the next bit, I just want to kind of let you know where the ball will be going. We're actually going to start on the quads, but eventually we're going to end up on the TFL. So just to kind of find that, go ahead and sit up, lean back enough where you can kind of just put your thumb right here in your hip crease. For a lot of people, it's kind of where the change pocket is on the jeans, but for me, it just helps where you typically fold at the hip, so placing your hand there. Sit up nice and tall. Keep the tissue pinned down a little bit, and then internally rotate your feet. When you do that internal rotation, you should feel the muscle pop up into your hand, and that's how we know we're in the right spot. So if you don't really feel that sense as you internally rotate, the muscle moving underneath the hand, kind of popping up into it sensation, maybe move your fingers out just a little bit until you do sense that. and just kind of keep a mental record of where that is, so when we're on our bellies, we know where to go. But we're going to move now into the front of the thigh. I think it can be really helpful here to have a block underneath the belly. It just kind of helps hold the body weight so you're not holding a forearm plank for the next little bit. But again, the balls are going to be side by side. Go ahead and place them right in front of your knee as you start to come down. And then drape yourself over the block, kind of right underneath the rib cage. Now for here, we can just gently roll. If the free leg is a little distracting, it can be really helpful to kind of just prop it over here to the side like a half frog position, or just bent underneath the body, outside of the body, whatever makes more sense for you. But we're just going to be rolling the bottom third of the quad here. So just down an inch or two, up an inch or two. I'm keeping my toes of that leg on the floor, but if it feels okay for you, or if you're using a foam roller, it might be nice to pick the feet up. And again, just like we did with the hamstring and the calf, just try to make sure you get more towards the inner, more towards the outer as well. And again, just gather in that information, how that feels. If there's any areas that are really tender, then that's a lot of the times the body letting you know that's an area to come back to, something we want to focus on, getting rid of the adhesions, which show themselves up as trigger points, or I just think it as an area that speaks a little louder, and you know it when you get it. All of us with myofascial will eventually hit a spot that's like, oh, okay, that's what that means. All right, we're going to just roll towards the middle part of the quad. So you can physically move your body down. You can physically pull the balls up, whatever makes more sense. But now you'll be more about mid-thigh. Again, I still, even for this one, like to use the block, but the block doesn't help you in any way. Feel free to lose it. I just think it's nice sometimes to be a little bit more lazy when it comes to myofascial release techniques. And then we're going to come just up to the upper portion. So here we might move the block out of the way. We're a little bit closer to having the hips closer towards the floor, so this might just be a little bit more accessible. But again, gathering in that information, seeing how that feels for you. And we're only staying on each spot for about 30 seconds, so it's not much. So if you find an area that really needs attention, it doesn't really take much. So if you're short on time, just knowing where to go can be really helpful for your own practice. Now think back to what spoke the loudest, and let's come into a little bit of compression. For me, it was right above the knee, but for you, it might be closer towards the hip. If you didn't even get closer towards the outside, you might internally rotate the foot, so you're kind of right on the edge of the IT band there. It tends to be pretty tender for a lot of us. And then remember that spot we kind of found where we were sitting and identifying the pocket. We're going to come right back to that area. So right back into that hip crease. And for this one, I'm just going to invite you to stay still. So you can stay up on the forearms, or if it makes more sense or feels more comfortable for you to lay prone completely flat onto your belly, feel free to do that instead. Again, take nice deep breaths, softening in. Now you stay where you are, just take a look at the camera. I want to let you know where we're going to be heading. We're going to have to pick up the hips, but if you palpate for your frontal hip bone and you identify where that IS bone is, we're going to be right along the bone, but on the outside of the hip. So hitting more glute med, glute min. But that's just where you want it. You want it right in line with the hip bone, but off towards the side. So I'm going to flip around so I have my back to you, but you can feel free just to come onto your belly and then negotiate. You can use one ball or two. I like to physically lay the balls down and then just kind of put my body on it. But if you prefer to kind of use them more as a kickstand and kind of just nestle them into your hips as you lean back and then lean forward, again, find what works for you. So this one, if you're not used to it, can be pretty tender pretty quickly. But again, remember, even though we're focusing on the knees, we want to look upstream and downstream. So we're really covering anything that could potentially be causing the knee any kind of pain, and just trying to get all of the surrounding tissues that connect to the knee to soften. And take another deep breath here. And if you find a spot that's really tender, I'm just trying to keep us on pace, but please feel free to pause the video, linger there, and then come back when you're ready. Often if we find a spot we want to linger, that can be really helpful. So make sure you're not rushing the experience. You can always hit pause. And then go ahead and lift up, release. I mentioned this on the other side, but we're going to target it a little bit is that IT band, because its connection at the knee can often invoke a lot of sensation. So if you think right above the knee and on the outside of the thigh, that's where we're going to drape the leg. We're actually going to come all the way down to lay down. You're going to pin your knees together and then just kind of mimic walking. And then as you do so, as you lengthen and straighten that bottom leg, you'll probably start to feel that in that IT band area. If you need a little bit more sensation, feel free to move the balls up a little bit or more towards the front if you're not feeling anything. But let the legs be really heavy as they rest on the balls here. And again, come back to that breath, just softening, melting in. And then release. So our last spot on this leg is going to be for the inner thighs. So for this one, we might have to flip over because, again, we're trying to stay on the same leg so we can just compare. So making sure you're still working the same leg, you're going to bring your block with you. Place it at an angle when you bring the leg up that it feels like it can support it. And we're going to take the balls, again, side by side, and we're going to place them right above the knee on the inner thigh. Again, go ahead and come down to support the head. You can also lay the head all the way down if that makes more sense for you. If it's helpful, you can pick the foot up, or you can leave the foot hanging and just let the body weight hold. And we're just going to work our way closer and closer towards the groin. So just letting the body kind of melt in. Taking nice deep breaths. So when you're ready, go ahead and move the balls towards the middle inner thigh, or if they fall off the block, reset them. If you're not getting a lot of sensation too, I think it can be really helpful just to kind of lean forward about a 45-degree angle. And that just kind of helps pin the tissue down onto the balls, giving you a little bit more sensation. You can also internally rotate by lifting the foot, keeping the knee and the inner thigh grounded onto the balls and onto the block. And then we'll find just one more spot right up in towards the groin region. And for this one, you will want to kind of lean forward at that 45-degree angle. And let's take a couple of deep breaths here. And then go ahead and release. Set your props off to the side. Come down to lay onto your back. And let's just take a moment in this restorative posture to see how the leg we just worked, which for me was my left leg, versus the leg we haven't. And if you only have knee pain on one side, maybe you just did the leg that had a little bit of knee pain. If you have knee pain on both sides, it can be really helpful to do the whole thing now on the other side. So this class was intended for knee resilience and knee pain. So I'm going to leave you with just the one side. But if you do have pain on both sides, please go ahead and start the video over and do everything we just did on the other leg. Otherwise, just stick with what you had. Hopefully the knee feels a little bit better. Please remember too, if you found a spot that spoke a little louder than most, that's something you want to come back to and keep doing, maybe even on a daily basis until the knee pain gets a little bit better and a little bit better. And as always, I want to thank you for sharing your practice time with me, as I know how precious that is. And until next time, be well.